Okay, Svante, great to see you and welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Ward, and thank you for having me.
You've had quite a journey from the banking world through to founding and leading Scandinavian Data Centers. And I think it's important to note this certainly isn't your first rodeo from a data center point of view, because you were heavily involved in building and exiting a data center business during the decade before launching SDC. So could you maybe walk us through that journey and the evolution of your career through to today?
Sure. Thank you for asking. Basically, like you mentioned, I was in banking and I pretty much hated every day of it, but it turned into a nice little 14-year journey. But my side hustle was helping entrepreneurs get going, finding capital to get their good ideas off the ground. And there were a couple of guys who were running a data center for one client in Stockholm, but the client was growing. They needed more capacity. So they bought one of the first military divestments in Sweden at the time, which was a big military installation bunker 2 hours outside of Stockholm. So they knew a lot about building data centers. They didn't know very much about how to fund them. So I helped find both the government, bank, and private capital, and actually put in a little bit of money myself. And that turned into a successful exit, because at the time we focused very much on security. So we took NATO security standards and tried to double them where applicable. And that turned out to be quite attractive to the market. We sold the site in five weeks to a US IT company.
And can you maybe talk to me a bit about what was it about that experience that really fueled your motivation to an ambition to start another data center business?
To be quite honest, I didn't want to do it again. It was severely painful, but but at the same time, there was something quite interesting about the whole prospect of data centers. Now, having the luxury, the privilege to be in the data center industry, it actually gives you a seat at the table, both at the latest developments in IT, but perhaps more and more importantly, in the latest developments in electricity, grid capacity, grid constraints. So I kind of felt if I could keep going in this line of work, then I could definitely have a pretty interesting career progression. Was my train of thought. I was quite lucky, because you always need partnerships to go far. The Chinese expression, which I'm probably going to butcher now, trying to do it off the cuff, is, if you want to go fast, go by yourself. If you want to go far, go with friends. I was luckily introduced to my now business partner, Simon Dorf. He had been in banking like myself, but also in private equity, and he had been battlefield promoted into CEO role, which he had done quite successfully, and even been named mid-cap CEO of the year in Sweden. That's kind of my running joke. If I would only had found the large cap CEO of the year, our company would be even better than it is today. But Simon's doing quite nicely. So it's a very good partnership. We have very clear synergies, and we're very complementary to each other. So anyway, we started talking about data centers, and we started thinking about what could be the data centers of the future. Security and uptime, delivery is always paramount for the client experience. But we were really sorely missing a bigger picture, a more holistic view about trying to perhaps do something a bit more circular about the whole thing, not only because it's the right thing to do and hopefully better for the environment down the road, but also because we think there's a clear and present business opportunity in thinking about the sector and the platform. So basically we started, digging into it and trying to figure out, could we create one of the world's greenest platforms, not just a site development, but actually a platform. And Sweden has one of the lowest carbon intensity grids on the planet. That's, I'd say, a very, very important, factor in a green data center, but also a cool climate. But that's basically what all the data center operators are already doing in the Nordics. So that's not taking the needle and moving it very far. What we also want to look at is, can we be really smart about the heat that we're generating? Basically a megawatt of data needs a megawatt of electricity. A megawatt of electricity generates about a megawatt of heat, very closely correlated. So on the back of that, if we be really smart about how we work the heat we use, not just as a line item in an RFP and buy a heat pump and put it in the closet and say job done, which unfortunately happens more frequently than the industry might want to admit, but can we really work with this heat? And that's kind of put us into what I call Data Center 2.0, which is trying very hard to see if we can design the data centers around the district heating grid's capacity to absorb heat. Ideally, with 100% offtake, 24/7, 365 years a year, but at the very least, have some kind of significant amount of the energy being reused for the grid itself. So that's Data Center 2.0. Simon found our first site It was in Eskilstuna, which is about an hour from Stockholm. So we call it Greater Stockholm. Stockholmers don't really agree with us, but that's fine. It is Greater Stockholm in a lot of ways, at least in data center circles. But what's really critical about the facility is it was where Sweden built its military engines during World War II. So it's a former military installation. And so it has the highest physical security you can get your hands on. It's 20 meters of granite. I mean, no missile can get through that. And it also was always built for being nuclear proof. But the two key benefits of the site was one, Atea, our now operational partner and sales partner, they're the largest IT company in the Nordics. They already had an existing data center operation for the last 15 years, 100% uptime. So it became a very natural fit to work together on building the platform. And then the Matarledningen, the main district heating pipe, runs very closely next to the facility. And we've even been able to buy the land, so we own the connection point. And that made us be able to have a very strategic and deep conversation with the local power company, which is also the local district heating company. And the key benefit of that is that we've been able to basically, with the help of our founding advisory team, which I'd say are the very, very cutting edge of what we have in Sweden in their different sectors. Bengt Johansson, who was on the management team of Ellevio, one of the three largest DSOs in Sweden. Well, he's our electricity lead, and he's been very, very important to us in helping understand how we should work with the power grid. I'll get back to that in just one second. But also Ulrika Yardfelt, who was on the management team of Vattenfall and actually running their district heating operation in Europe. It's the world's largest district heating business. And she's been very close to several data center to district heating grid connection projects. So she really understands that process and those nuances and how to do that. But most importantly, these two people and Morgan Ledner, who was running Volvo IT's 40 data centers globally, gave us credibility very early on to have these meaningful strategic dialogues with the local power company. And that's kind of morphed into what I call Data Center 3.0. And that's basically trying to use the data center to work all of its different capabilities to become that steward of power, that good steward of power. I mean, our little tagline is power is not a right, it's a privilege. What that basically means is we don't assume that we should get power because we're a business, even if we're a Swedish business, that we shouldn't automatically get power. We need to deliver something to both the local community, the nation, and to the greater digital ecosystem. So basically what we're trying to do is use all the different components of the data center to create the best, highest possible societal benefit. With our batteries and our UPSs to help stabilize the grid, having dialogues with the different stakeholders about this reserve power capacity that we have, when and how could we potentially use that as another auxiliary resource, providing our client SLAs will agree to it, of course. But that is a huge resource that's just being neglected at the moment. And then finally, what's really interesting about the heat reuse aspect is actually most heat power plants need to make a choice at the troughs of winter. Do we focus more on generating heat or more on generating power? And the problem is when it's at its coldest, you need both. But if you have this base load of heat coming from the data center, these heat power plants can actually focus on making electricity when it's needed most. And then the last little bit of the conversation, which is very cool if we can get it to work, and I'm pretty sure we will over time, is actually use the two types of heat coming out of a data center. The high grade, call it AI heat, use that for the district heating grid. That's much more of a good economical benefit to that. But also use the low grade heat for building greenhouses because they both help the region become more self-reliant from a food production standpoint, but most importantly, because it creates entry-level jobs, which is what the politicians sorely need to get people out of being taking state payments, benefits into being taxpayers.
Fantastic. Yeah, I think it's really refreshing the way that you talk about and approach sustainability. It really does seem central to SDC's identity. And, there's a lot of talk in the industry about sustainability, but I think a lot of organizations are tending to say roughly the same thing. So it's really refreshing to hear you talk about that stuff.
Interestingly enough, actually it was the investors where we had the first interest, I would say. And then slowly but surely the media interest has been building. And now we're seeing multiple different types of stakeholders, from end clients to district heating companies to, different cities outside of Sweden contacting us, very interested in this approach. But there's also a greedy aspect which I need to get across, and that's because that's what we do, right? To try to be successful at it, but also trying to do something in the right way. And the greedy aspect is, so ceteris paribus, all things being equal, we think this approach will give us an undue amount of likelihood of getting power, and not only from the allocators of power, but actually the property owners who want to do the right thing. But also every one of these silos that I've talked about, the energy silo, the backup power silo, the heat silo, the food production silo, they all need to be their own P&L profit loss centers where they're driving value creation, because that's at the end of the day how this is going to become impactful. For it to become impactful, it needs to scale. And for it to scale, it needs to be a business opportunity. The last little comment to that is I will potentially, it hasn't been set in stone yet, but potentially speak to the Swedish political parties at the Congress about what we're trying to do. And what we're trying to do very much is to replicate what's being done partially in Finland and Denmark. Data centers that reuse heat, their energy taxes should be lower, all things being equal, than a normal data center, because that's how you as a regulator can nudge the industry to do the right thing. And that I can give you right now as an option to the clients that come join us. I can't guarantee it, but I think it's highly likely that that will play out. So then you're not only future-proofing your facility from a ESG or environmental regulation perspective, but hopefully there should be a clear business savings aspect to it as well.
Have there been any difficult trade-offs that you've had to make or will have to make when it comes to making circularity real that you might be able to talk about?
Well, one big trade-off is, and that's a little bit our secret sauce, is you need credibility and trust with the decision makers. Not so much from the fiber providers, because that's their business, but much more from the district heating company side and the energy allocators. And basically, that's a little bit of our secret sauce, is having this very bespoke knowledge about how the district heating grids are built, how the energy grids are built, and how the corresponding fiber grids are built, and see where we can triangulate those to find that perfect spot in the spider webs to be able to do all three.
The team's very lean, and you've been steadily building your leadership team, including some new appointments over the last few months with real deep data center subject matter expertise. So appointments like Daniel Joyce as Chief Development Officer, Sales Director Lars Tissen. I've known Daniel a few years, and I think he's a real heavyweight hire for you, given his background and pedigree in the space over the last couple of decades or even more. Can you maybe talk to me about your approach to building out the team and some of its strengths?
That's what I call the flywheel. It's something that you can't put into the business model or the financial model, but is very much playing out in real time, in real life. And that is all these, that we have this genuine, authentic desire to try to do something different, a little bit differently, and try to do it a little bit more circularly. It really attracts and speaks to a lot of people who are very good at what they do, but are also trying to find a higher meaning in what their employment is giving them besides just a paycheck. And that's why we were able to secure that very, very senior advisory team initially. But that's also why Eva Rubin, who was our COO, who used to be COO of KPMG, came on very early and has been instrumental in our progression. Daniel was very clear that he joined us for the reason that he felt that we were trying to do something that others were not really trying as hard to do. Lars is the same way. And honestly, we have had introduced where people say, you know what, that's great. I don't mind it, but I'm here for the money. That's kind of a bad way to start an interview with us because that kind of tells us that you really, really don't care. And I think that's what is kind of our North Star, or what kind of unites us, even though we all are different in age and gender and many different things, but we all kind of circle the wagons around that this is something we really want to do and do in the best possible way.
Yeah, fantastic. So it seems like you're really shaping a team culture that matches the circular vision of SDC there. Yeah. Also noticed earlier this year that you'd secured some significant investment, which I think is a major vote of confidence. How does that investment change what SDC can achieve in this next phase?
Of course, it takes you from the practice pitch into the real game, so to speak, and that's of course highly. I mean, with that being said, we've been running a data center with a data center client, but now we can really put our business plan, our ecosystem approach into reality, turning the vision turning something from the vision into a reality. and Balder, who, when we were approached and had offers from private equity, from big European energy companies, so that was a huge vote of confidence just that we are on to the right track. But we really wanted, you make that joint venture partnership once in the company's early career. You don't do it many times. And you really need to make sure it's the right match. And what we really liked about Balder was that Erik Selin, who is their founder and creator in a lot of ways, he's very entrepreneurial. He's very involved. He really has a strong track record of letting founders run their business plan and being very supportive. And there's also no divestment policy. So there's no hard 5-year, 7-year time frame where we try to maximize value creation and then we're forced to sell the company to the biggest buyer down the road. And Balder also was one of the big, or has been one of the big property development companies in the Nordics. It's the largest listed property company. So they've done something right over the last 30 years. But that is, data centers is not something they've been in before. So it's something they've been looking at, but they just haven't found the right opportunity, and they felt that we were a very good match. So, super, super positive all around.
Yeah, I suppose that longer term investment outlook feeds very well into your ability to implement your sustainability goals as well. You have to make less trade-offs from that point of view. Is that a fair thing to say?
Absolutely. I mean, Sweden is historically number 1 or number 2 largest net energy exporter in Europe. And that's not set to change anytime soon. We have all this surplus power in our country, but we've been a little bit burned by promises that were made around large-scale developments and perhaps not always coming through. So there's a lot of political resistance to just allowing a wide opening of lots of data center developments. Both the politicians and the other stakeholders want to tread very carefully. They don't want to replicate Ireland going a little bit too fast, too far. The big difference between Ireland and Sweden is Sweden is a one big power bank. I mean, it's a huge country. It has lots of rivers, lots of hydro, lots of surplus power. It's just a question of now, we kind of needed the keys to the castle, if you want to use that expression, in terms of we really think we have this societal benefit first approach, which can give us the keys to unlock these larger pools of power, which is very much in all our interests. I mean, a data center run in Sweden generates about 5 to 7% the amount of carbon dioxide of an equivalent data center on the continent. So there's all this green, abundant, and very cheap power up in our neck of the woods. We should be deploying more data centers up here.
What about their property portfolio and real estate expertise? How helpful or otherwise is that going to be to the business over the next phase as well?
I mean, Balder has incredible access to the capital pools of Sweden, of Northern Europe, of Europe and beyond. So that's a huge, huge benefit. But they also have over 2,000 large real estate holdings around not only the Nordics, but also Germany. But since we are Scandinavian Data Centers, our long-term goal is to build inference data centers using AI to heat cities and power cities, or stabilize the power of cities around the Nordics. And them already being an established presence, already having the local contacts, the political contacts is a huge accelerator of the business plan we want to deploy.
Okay, well, I always finish the podcast on the same question. So can I ask you, in your opinion, what are people in the industry not talking about that you think they should be?
I think they're not talking about the very obvious thing that we have this huge amount of power that we consume, and that there's so much opportunity to do something really sensible with it instead of just trying to drive a slightly below 1.2 PUE and being heroes, when there's so much other things we can do to help ourselves, our own businesses, our local communities, and the planet as a whole. So, energy reuse factor is something I think should be the first line item that you show off when you're designing and talking about a new data center deployment, not the PUE, because at the end of the day, if our needs are going from, McKinsey was saying on a podcast the other day, that our current needs are 70 gigawatt, or our current use is 70 gigawatts, and it's probably going to climb up to 240 gigawatts by 2030. And by the way, 60% of the existing stock needs to be retrofitted anyway. The amount of infrastructure that needs to be deployed in the next 5 years is hard to take in. And that's why it's so critical, because this infrastructure will be remaining for the next 50 to 100 years. We should really make a huge effort as an industry to design and build the right way.
Fantastic. And certainly seems that SDC are walking the walk when it comes to that. Okay, well, look, really good to see you. Really appreciate you taking the time to chat today, and wish you and the team all the best in your next period of growth.
Likewise, WordWard, and congratulations to becoming a dad again pretty soon. That's going to be an adventure in itself.
Thank you very much. Yeah, really appreciate that.